Right, as it happens every election eve, a number of the country's major newspapers, they come out and they endorse either Labor or the coalition to win tomorrow night. Anthony Albanese received the endorsement of the Sydney Morning Herald, the Age and the Canberra Times, while Scott Morrison, he picked up the support of the Australian, the Daily Telegraph in Sydney, Victoria's Herald Sun, Brisbane's Courier Mail and more. Many citing Morrison's leadership throughout the pandemic as the basis for their endorsement. The paper I find most interesting is the AFR, the Financial Review, which is of course a Fairfax, or what do they call it now, Nine newspaper, who came out and endorsed the Prime Minister. For their analysis, Sky's Northern Territory Bureau Chief Matt Cunningham, who's joining us now from Alice Springs, and broadcaster Jane Marwick, who comes to us from Perth. Welcome to you both. I'm getting around the country tonight. I want to make sure my viewers get a sense of the mood, because these things are never uniform. Matt, this says to me that after the release of Labor's costings, this AFR bid there for the Prime Minister, that after the release of the costings, we look at the gaffes from the Labor leader, particularly in relation to the economy. The gurus at the AFR, they're worried about Labor's very thin economic agenda. What do you think?
Well, and readers of the Australian Financial Review, Peter, tend, I would say, to be somewhat more conservative than the readers of the other nine newspapers. And, of course, they are focused on financial issues and, in particular, the economy. So I'm not particularly surprised that the Australian Financial Review is backing Scott Morrison. I think when you look at the two parties, I think people have a choice between a safe pair of hands and a Labor Party that is untested, and also a Labor Party that's had a leader that really hasn't been across the detail when it comes to some of these key measures, including the unemployment rate. We know Anthony Albanese got off to a bad start at the beginning of this campaign when Sky News' Andrew Clennell asked him that question about the unemployment rate, and he couldn't answer it.
Right, Jane, I'll get your assessment more broadly on WA in a moment, but here's the front page of your local in Perth, the West Australian, and I tell you, it's peak teal on the front. So how much of this mood out there is about the government's record, and how much is it actually personal against the Prime Minister rather than for the Labor leader?
This is really interesting, Peter. You're talking, and good evening. I'm coming to you from Andrew Hastie's seat in Cannington, and at this booth that I'm at, 17,000 people have already pre-polled. That's 41% of people in this electorate. You might even be able to see the member for Canning behind me. That is the seat of Curtin, where Kate Chaney, the independent, is challenging Celia Hammond. I was talking to people this morning in Curtin who said to me they still had not made up their minds, traditional Liberal voters who feel like a vote for change. They're just in the mood for change. And if you say to them, Kate Chaney on her own or Monique Ryan on her own can't make much difference and put those arguments, they're not interested in that. They just argue for change, and I just think Curtin's going to be closer than we probably thought it would be. Out here in what is now true Liberal heartland, Andrew Hastie has this seat on a big margin. I've noticed people coming up. Andrew Hastie's name recognition is fantastic. People come up and they say, I want to vote for Andrew Hastie, but I don't want to vote for Scott Morrison.
Interesting, Matt. I'll come to you on Lingiari in a moment, but Jane, just on the issues they're talking to you at that booth about, because that is Middle Australia where you are.
Yep.
What are the issues that they're raising?
Very interesting, Peter. When we look at the base, you watching Sky News, people in the coalition, a lot of voters have said that they wish the coalition, the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party had prosecuted their climate change credentials, if you like. And Sky News has done a very good job of that. But they're saying, look, we could close Australia tomorrow. Would it affect the climate? Australia's done very, very well. We sign up to things and we do our bit with regards to climate change. A lot of dislike for net zero here with coalition voters, but in this seat, which is really Middle Australia, people very much like their local candidate who's done a lot of work on the ground. So I expect that Andrew Hastie will do quite well in this seat. But as you and I and everyone in Sky have been saying for quite some time, the base are disappointed. No one's mentioned superannuation. Today there was a mention of Anthony Albanese, and it was a woman who was asking Andrew Hastie how Anthony Albanese could indeed meet his promises.
All right, Matt, let's go to you. I want to talk to you about Lingiari. That's where you are, seat of Lingiari tonight. It's pretty much all of the Northern Territory. The area of Darwin, just around Darwin, is the seat of Solomon. This is interesting. The member's been there for a couple of decades. He's retiring, the Labor incumbent. The coalition has got to win it to offset likely losses elsewhere. What's the mood?
Well, it's hard to tell, Peter, because it is such a big seat, 1.34 million square kilometres, Lingiari. Now, I'm in Alice Springs, and I can tell you the mood in Alice Springs is one of concern, really about one word, and that is crime. Crime is dominating discussion here in Alice Springs. Property crime, according to Northern Territory Police statistics out today, up 50% in the past 12 months. So that's something that the Country Liberal Party and its candidate, Damien Ryan, will be campaigning hard on, no doubt. There's been a lot of angst towards the former Gunner government. We saw the Chief Minister replaced last week, replaced with Natasha Files. It'll be interesting to see whether people in Alice Springs take those frustrations with the Northern Territory government out on the Labor candidate, Marion Scrimgeour, at a federal poll. I spoke to Warren Snowden, who has been the incumbent in Lingiari since its inception in 2001 today. He said that Labor really needs to hold its own in Alice Springs, which it's done in the past, really win 45 to 50% of the vote here. That's going to be a tough ask for Marion Scrimgeour, who doesn't have the benefit of incumbency. She's a Tiwi woman. She's from the Tiwi Islands, not particularly well known in Alice Springs, so it could be a challenge for her to hold this seat tomorrow.
All right, Jane, I'm after a prediction, but I'm keen for you to base it on some assessment of the campaign, particularly over the last 6 weeks. But let's be honest, we've been in a campaign since Christmas. How do you see things?
Look, I think it's going to be very, very tight, Peter. If it were a couple of weeks ago, I thought Labor had this in the bag. I'm not so sure. The seats here that are in doubt for the coalition are probably Swan and Pearce. They're pretty small margins. I think Pearce is about 6.9%. Christian Porter vacated that. Steve Irons vacated Swan. That margin's smaller there. I think Vince Connolly will be interesting in the seat of Cowan. He has campaigned very, very well, but without this sort of heavy machinery, if you like, of Anne Ali. One thing that's come up here a lot is there are a lot of United Australia people here, Peter. The big presence down here, and in seats like this, United Australia Party has preferenced Labor ahead of the incumbents like Andrew Hastie. So watch that. Watch those preferences. Curtin is going to be interesting. I think Celia Hammond will probably pull away, but you just don't know with preferences. So I think it's on a knife edge. People in Labor are saying to me they think the coalition's got it, and vice versa. But in a seat like this, there have been an enormous number of volunteers for Andrew Hastie. Not all Liberal seats in this state have had that sort of support, Peter, I can tell you that.
Yes, and we know that the opposition there is in a bad way at a state level. Matt, give us your take, not just to confine yourself to the NT. You're a seasoned operator. What's your view of both the campaign and a likely result on Saturday night?
Well, I think it's been a pretty messy campaign. I don't think either leader has really covered themselves in glory. I think the campaign has really shone a spotlight on Anthony Albanese. I think he's probably lost a little bit of bark over the campaign. I think that going into this election in 2022, it's got a little bit of a feel of 2019 about it. In 2019, all the polls were pointing towards a Labor victory, and then come Saturday night, most of the pundits ended up with egg on their face because they got it completely wrong. Look, I think it'd be a brave person to try and tip the outcome of this election. I think there's a possibility we'll see a hung parliament, but I think we'll be counting well into the night tomorrow night before we get a result. As for the Northern Territory, I think Labor's going to win pretty comfortably in Solomon. They have the benefit of incumbency. Luke Gosling has been the member there for 6 years. The Conservatives have been divided. Lingiari, though, as I said before, has been interesting. I saw a poll earlier in the week that said that Labor was comfortably in front in Lingiari. I have no idea how anyone can poll the seat of Lingiari, given how vast it is and the fact it's made up of so many Aboriginal communities. I think Lingiari will be an interesting seat to watch tomorrow night.
Absolutely, and as I said, the government's got to pick up seats to survive with all those retirements and redistributions. Well, keep going, Jane. You're still out there handing out and getting a sense of things on the ground for a little bit longer. Matt Cunningham, enjoy that sunset. I'll be talking to you both over the weekend. Thank you for your time tonight.